I didn't expect to hear my brother's voice again. Not after 3 years. Not after the fire. And especially not in a 30-second audio file with no name, no explanation, just a strange email that hit my inbox at 3:03 a.m. with the subject line, "Do you still miss him?" I was half asleep when I clicked it, lying in my dark apartment, the glow of my laptop the only light in the room. The moment I pressed play, my breath caught in my throat. It started with the sound of wind, low, howling, like it was funneled through stone. Then came the choir. Faint at first, but layered and chilling, rising like a tide. It didn't sound like any music I'd ever heard. It was broken, off-key yet still, hauntingly beautiful. A strange harmony that crawled into your spine and refused to leave. Then I heard it. Roman. Just one word. Soft. Familiar. Like a whisper from across a frozen room. It was Mateo's voice. I sat up fast, heart racing, ears straining. The choir swelled behind the voice, then crashed into static, screeching and sharp. I ripped my headphones off. My hands were shaking. It wasn't possible. Mateo had died 3 years ago in a church fire in Galicia, Spain. He'd been on one of his urban exploration trips, his so-called haunted pilgrimages. That was his thing. Breaking into forgotten places, filming the dead silence, looking for ghosts no one else believed in. St. Eloria Cathedral was supposed to be his final documentary. All they ever found was a piece of his camera and melted scraps of his backpack. The cathedral had burned down that same night. Official cause unknown. For years, I blamed myself. I was the one who told him he was wasting his life chasing shadows. I was the one who refused to go with him. I tried to move on. Tried to convince myself he was gone, and that there was nothing left to chase. Until tonight. The email had no sender name, no return address. The location data embedded in the file was even stranger, tagged. San Telas reopened. San Telas. That was the village Mateo had mentioned before he disappeared. A ghost town, supposedly abandoned for decades after a landslide. The last place he was seen alive. I stared at the screen for a long time. The cursor blinked beside the file, like it was daring me to open it again. I should have ignored it, deleted it, shut the laptop, and gone back to pretending the dead stay dead. But instead, I clicked play again, and again, and again. The voice never changed. Neither did the whisper. Roman. By sunrise, I had booked a flight to Spain. I was going to San Telas, and I was going to find out why my brother's voice was still echoing from a cathedral that burned to the ground. The road into San Telas was nothing more than a winding scar through the hills, cracked, narrow, and half swallowed by the creeping forest. My rental car groaned with every mile, like it knew better than I did. Fog pressed against the windows, so thick I couldn't see the road signs anymore. If there even were any. I had plugged the coordinates into my GPS, but halfway through the last stretch, it just blinked out. Dead screen. No signal. I was alone. A sign finally appeared through the mist. Hand-painted. Weathered. It read, San Telas. Nothing more. No welcome, no motto, no population count. Just a name hanging like a warning. The village looked like it had been abandoned years ago. Stone houses leaned into each other as if whispering secrets. Roof tiles were missing, chimneys crooked. A single road led through the heart of the village, but there wasn't a soul in sight. I parked and stepped out. The air smelled like wet ash and moss. It was quiet, unnaturally so. No birds. No dogs. No wind. Just that thick, unnatural silence that wraps around your spine. I slung my bag over my shoulder and walked down the center of the street. My boots crunched on gravel, the only sound for what felt like miles. The fog swirled slowly, like it was watching me. A door creaked open to my left. An old woman stood just beyond the threshold, her face half covered by a black shawl. Deep lines carved her face, and her eyes looked tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that comes from seeing too much. She stared at me. I offered a nod. "Excuse me. I'm looking for the cathedral. St. Eloria." Her eyes didn't leave mine. She made the sign of the cross slowly, trembling fingers brushing her forehead, chest, and shoulders. Then she said, barely above a whisper, "That place is ash now. You don't walk into fire, Niño. Fire walks into you." And just like that, she shut the door. I stood there for a moment, unsure whether to knock again or keep moving. A crow landed on a roof nearby, its call loud enough to jolt me. I took it as a sign to move on. The cathedral wasn't hard to find. It rose at the edge of the village like a skeleton. Black stone bones. The bell tower was cracked clean down the middle. Chunks of the roof were missing. Ivy crept up the walls like fingers clawing at heaven. The huge oak doors were charred black, one half hanging by a hinge. Even from the road, I could feel something wrong. Not just the way it looked, but the air around it. Heavy, pressed down, like stepping into a room where someone had just screamed, but left no sound behind. I stood there for a while, staring. Mateo. His name echoed in my chest. This was the last place he mentioned before he disappeared. He'd been chasing ghost stories. Whispers of the singing ruins. A fire that didn't destroy sound. I thought it was just obsession. A grieving process twisted into something reckless. Now I wasn't so sure. I stepped through the iron gate. It creaked open with a groan like it hadn't moved in years. The courtyard was covered in weeds, cracked stones, and the remains of old candles melted into the ground. I walked to the cathedral doors, hesitated, and placed my palm on the blackened wood. It was warm. Not from the sun, it had been cloudy all day. No, this heat felt wrong. Like the last breath of a fire that should have died long ago. I pushed the door open. It groaned, slow and stubborn, revealing darkness beyond. My flashlight flickered as I stepped inside. And just for a moment, just 1 second, I heard it. A voice. Not a whisper, not a breath. A clear, sorrowful note, hanging in the air like it had been waiting for me. The choir was still singing. The sky hung low over San Telas, thick with clouds the color of old bruises. I stood at the edge of the cathedral ruins, my boots sinking slightly into the wet, ashen earth. The wind carried a smell I couldn't name, part smoke, part rot, and something else. Something older. It hit the back of my throat like a memory I didn't want to remember. The cathedral was exactly where the map said it would be, yet it looked like it had no business still standing. The stone walls were blackened and cracked. Massive portions of the roof had caved in. The twin bell towers, once proud and tall, were jagged at the tops, as if bitten by something with teeth too big for this world. I took a deep breath. Then I stepped over the rusted gate. The air changed the moment I crossed it. It wasn't just colder, it was heavier. Each step toward the entrance felt like walking through water. The doors, or what was left of them, had long since fallen inward. I stepped inside. The silence was alive. No birds, no wind, no creaking of old wood. Just a stillness so complete it hummed in my ears. The main hall was a graveyard of charred pews. Some were nothing more than piles of black splinters. Others stood half-melted, their backs warped like they had tried to twist away from the fire that consumed them. Above me, what remained of the ceiling opened up to the gray sky. Rain had soaked into the stone over time, but I could still see streaks of soot painted like claw marks along the walls. The altar at the far end stood untouched. Clean even. As if the fire had stopped just short of it. I walked down the center aisle, my footsteps echoing strangely. I wasn't sure why, but I felt like I should be whispering. Like I had stepped into someone's home without knocking. There were scorch marks everywhere, except for one section on the right side of the nave. A choir loft, partially intact. The railing was blackened, but the steps leading up looked almost new. My stomach tightened. Something moved above. A soft shuffling, like cloth brushing against stone. I froze. Mateo? I whispered. No answer. I climbed the stairs slowly, each one groaning under my weight. My flashlight flickered as I reached the top. The floor of the loft was warped but steady. I shone the light across the space. That's when I saw it. A music stand, standing perfectly upright in the middle of the loft. No dust. No ash. It looked as if someone had just placed it there. On it rested a single page of sheet music, the notes written in deep red ink. I stepped closer. The ink wasn't dry. It glistened. Then I heard it. The faintest hum. Not from the page. From the walls. A low, droning hum, like voices beneath the stone. It wasn't a song. Not yet. Just a few tones stretched out in the dark, waiting to be stitched into something terrible. I turned around quickly, heart thudding. No one was there. But I could feel something. Not watching. Listening. I didn't know what I expected to find here. I thought maybe I'd hear something, record something strange, feel a rush of adrenaline, and go back home to analyze it like I always did. But this was different. The cathedral wasn't abandoned. It had just been waiting. And now I was inside. The door I came through? Gone. Only shadows. And the choir, somewhere beneath the ash, humming louder now. Waiting for the music to start. I found it beneath the altar, buried in a hollow space behind a loose slab of stone. The air down there was colder, heavier, like the stone itself was mourning something. Dust clung to my fingers, thick and gritty, as I pulled the old journal out of the darkness. It was bound in black leather, cracked and stiff from fire and time. The edges were singed, some pages half-curled like burnt leaves. The front cover was blank, but when I opened it, the first page hit me like a fist to the chest. In careful, looping handwriting, someone had written, "May the voice of flame meet the voice of heaven, and may harmony break the veil." The name at the bottom, Father Pedro Lazaro. I sat cross-legged on the cold stone, flashlight tucked under my arm, and started flipping through the pages. Most of it was written in Spanish and Latin, but I could understand enough to realize this wasn't a diary. It was a ritual manual. The first few pages described choral arrangements, how notes could be tuned not just to harmonize with each other, but with what Pedro called the hidden frequency. He believed that within sacred music was a pattern, an opening to something deeper than sound, something spiritual, or something far worse. There were diagrams of throat positions, breathing techniques, chants marked with strange symbols in the margins. And then there were the prayers, twisted versions of church hymns, rewritten with strange verses. Et lux perpetua inferno lucit. Let eternal light shine in hell. That wasn't a mistranslation. That was deliberate. One page had a musical staff drawn in red ink, or maybe it was dried blood. The notes had no title, just a single word at the bottom. Ascencio. It looked like sheet music, but I could feel something vibrating from the page. Not sound exactly, more like pressure, like when you drive into the mountains and your ears pop. I didn't dare hum the melody. Farther in, the entries grew frantic. The handwriting shook, letters dipped and danced off the lines. The children sing it without effort. Their voices ring clear, so clear. Even the ones who were afraid now smile and sleep. It has begun. Then another entry. The song never ends. I thought it would stop when the fire came, but now the ash sings too. It echoes without breath. They wait for the last verse. The final note. I see Mateo in their faces. I froze. Mateo. My brother's name, written in a decaying cathedral hundreds of miles from home, by a priest who should have died long before any of this started. I turned the next page. It was blank. And the next. And the next. Then at the back cover, one more line scratched in with something sharp. El director ha llegado. The conductor has arrived. I didn't want to be down there anymore. I shoved the journal into my bag and stood up. But before I left, I turned around and looked at the stone slab one last time. There were scratch marks inside the wall, just above where the journal had rested. For deep lines, like fingernails clawing at stone. Whatever had been locked beneath this altar hadn't wanted to stay. And now I had its book. I should have left the moment I saw the vines pulse on the chapel walls like veins. Should have turned around when the sunset burned crimson across the sky, staining the cathedral's bones with something too red to be light. But I didn't. The door creaked open, as if expecting me. I stepped inside, flashlight in one hand, recorder in the other. The air hit me like the breath of a crypt, dry, old, and full of dust that clung to my throat. The remains of the once beautiful St. Eloria Cathedral were blackened and hollow. Its tall arches curved upward like ribs, and the cracked stone floor was littered with burned hymnals and shattered glass. Moonlight filtered through the holes in the ceiling, revealing pieces of stained glass that had melted and re-hardened like bloodied tears. I clicked on the recorder. Day 1, I whispered. Inside the cathedral. No signs of structural collapse yet. Strange atmosphere, still smells like the fire happened yesterday. My boots echoed as I stepped down the center aisle. Something about the silence wasn't right. It wasn't true silence. It was more like something was holding its breath. Then I heard it. A note. Soft. Barely there. Hanging in the air like the whisper of a memory. It came from above, the choir loft. I looked up. Darkness. I couldn't see anything, but that single note rang again, slightly louder, and then another joined it, forming a simple, sad harmony. I turned off my flashlight. Don't ask me why. Maybe I thought I'd see better in the dark. Maybe some part of me knew light had no place here. That was when I saw the shape. It stood at the far edge of the choir loft, facing me. A silhouette, tall and thin. The glow from the broken stained glass behind it made it look like a shadow cut out of moonlight. And it was humming. The same tune I heard on the recording. The same melody my brother used to hum when we were kids and couldn't sleep. Mateo, I whispered. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just kept humming. I climbed the stone staircase slowly, heart hammering, each step creaking like it would give way. The closer I got, the colder the air became. By the time I reached the top, I could see the old wooden music stand, still intact amid the ash, and the decayed robes of a long-dead choir draped over the railing. But the figure was gone. Only the echo of the humming remained. And then music. Sudden. Loud. A full choir. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once, as if the very walls were singing. Male voices, female voices, children's voices, all blending into one impossible harmony. It shook the dust from the rafters and made my ears ring. I dropped my flashlight. It hit the floor and rolled away, casting crazy shadows across the stone. The air vibrated. Then silence. So fast it stole my breath. I turned and faced the loft again. There, sitting where the organ used to be, was a small recording tape. One I hadn't brought. I picked it up, hands trembling. It had no label. Just my name scratched into the plastic in red ink. No, not ink. Something darker. Thicker. Blood? The cold in the room turned sharp. My breath came out in clouds. And from behind me, I heard a voice I'll never forget. "Roman," it said. My brother's voice. But there was no warmth in it. No love. Just emptiness, like something wearing his voice the way a priest wears robes. I turned around. Nothing. Only the shadows. And the choir pit far below waiting. Still humming. Still alive. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I must have dozed off for an hour or two, curled up on the cold cathedral floor with my back against a broken pew. But even in sleep, I was aware. Aware of the air, how it shifted. Aware of the quiet creaking of scorched wood. Aware that something unseen was listening, breathing. At some point in the early hours, just before the sun tried to rise behind a curtain of black clouds, I opened my eyes and saw the outline of the choir loft above me. And I heard it again. A whisper. Then the faintest trace of a tune. Just a few notes. Familiar. That's when I saw the glint of something near the altar. A small metal box half buried in ash. I crawled over, brushed off the cinders, and opened it. Inside was a photograph. Faded. Charred on the edges. But clear enough to make my breath catch. It was a group shot, 10 or so boys standing in front of a pulpit, robed in white. Their faces were pale, a bit blurred, like the light didn't quite settle on them. Standing in the center was a tall man in black with a sunken face, Father Pedro. And next to him, Mateo, my baby brother, wearing a choir robe, smiling, his hand resting on the hymn book clutched to his chest. But that's not possible. He disappeared 3 years ago. This photo, I turned it over. There was a date scribbled on the back in old ink. February 14th. 1 year after he went missing. My head spun. I sat there on the cracked tiles, photo trembling in my hands. It had to be a trick. Someone's cruel joke. But deep down I knew it wasn't. The cathedral had kept him. Somehow. Some way. The candle I had lit earlier flickered, though there was no breeze. And then softly I heard it again. A hum. Childlike. Coming from behind me. I turned too fast and nearly lost my balance, scraping my hand on the stone. No one was there. Just the empty pulpit and the burned lectern. But now, the tune lingered in my ears. Like it had been sewn there. I clutched my head. I couldn't get it out. Then I realized something that made my blood run cold. I was humming it too. I didn't even notice at first. It just slipped from my lips like breathing. The same notes I'd heard on that recording. The same ones Mateo used to hum when he thought no one was listening. I looked at my hands. One of them, my left, was smeared in something dark. Blood. Thin streaks ran down from the nail beds to my knuckles, like I'd been scratching at something in my sleep. Panic took over. I stood up too fast, knocked over my camera tripod, and stumbled toward the front doors. Still sealed. Still shut like before. The walls seemed closer now. The ceiling lower. The burnt paintings that lined the hallway to the vestry looked more twisted than yesterday. Like the eyes of the saints were following me now. Judging. Waiting. I clutched the photo tighter. His eyes in the picture, they weren't joyful. Not the way I remembered. There was fear behind that smile. Fear and something else. A plea. He had been trying to warn me all along. And I had walked straight into it. I didn't know it yet, but something had started that night. Something ancient and unfinished. The choir hadn't just sung to call back the dead. It had been waiting for a conductor. And I had already begun to hum the first verse. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. The air inside the cathedral was colder than before, thick like wet stone. My flashlight had died hours ago. The only light now came from the moon, pouring in through the shattered stained glass windows, casting broken saints on the floor. I had fallen asleep on a pew, wrapped in my jacket, the journal of Father Pedro still clutched in my hands. I don't even remember drifting off. One minute I was reading about the hymn, about how the voice of flame must sing in harmony with the breath of ash, and the next, I was asleep in the dark. But I wasn't alone anymore. There was a sound. Not footsteps. Not whispers. Something more deliberate. A steady dragging noise echoed from the altar above me, like a heavy robe brushing across stone. I sat up too fast, my heart pounding in my ears. I should have run. I should have stayed still. But curiosity, or maybe madness, made me climb the cracked stairs to the altar. The air felt warmer the closer I got. Not like fire, more like breath. And then I saw him. He stood behind the altar, tall and still, his face hidden by the long shadow of his hood. His robe was black but coated in ash, like it had been pulled from a fire. There was something unnatural about how he stood, too straight, too stiff, like he hadn't moved in years, and suddenly remembered how. I whispered without meaning to. "Pedro." His head tilted slightly, and I caught a glimpse of his face under the hood. Pale. Paper-white skin stretched thin over sharp bones. His eyes were wrong. Where the whites should be, there was only yellow, like old parchment soaked in smoke. But it was the way he smiled that chilled me. His lips peeled back slowly, like the act itself was painful. "You've come far, Roman," he said. His voice was calm. Warm even. Like a priest welcoming a lost sheep. I stepped back. You were supposed to be dead." "I was." His eyes flicked to the journal in my hand. "And yet I sing." I could barely breathe. "What do you want from me?" Pedro moved now, slowly circling the altar. His steps made no sound. "You came to listen. That was your first mistake. Listening always comes before singing. And once the hymn enters you, it never leaves." He pointed a long, bony finger at my chest. "It's inside you already. The final verse." I shook my head. "No, I'm not like you. I'm not going to finish what you started." His smile widened, cracking his lips. "But you already are." Suddenly the cathedral pulsed. Not visibly, but I felt it, like the walls were breathing in time with some ancient rhythm. My ears began to ring, softly at first, then louder, like the beginning of a chant I couldn't understand. Pedro's voice grew louder, firmer. "You've heard them, haven't you? Their song in the silence. The ash remembers, Roman. The fire, it listens." I turned to run, but the cathedral had changed. The doors I entered through earlier were gone. The path behind me was now just endless rows of pews, stretching into shadows that didn't exist before. "You can't leave," Pedro said behind me. "Not until the song ends. And songs only end when the conductor falls silent." I screamed his name, but it bounced off the stone like it meant nothing. The choir loft above creaked. Something heavy shifted in the rafters. A distant hum began. No words, just the sound of breath before a voice begins to sing. I looked up. Dozens of faint figures sat in the ruined choir stands. Ash fell from their robes like snow. Their mouths opened slowly. They did not blink. And neither did Pedro. I backed away, my hands trembling, my mind unraveling. "You brought this on yourself, Roman," he said softly. "Grief is the invitation. Guilt is the doorway. But you are the conductor." Then he vanished. Just like that, like he had never been there at all. But the voices didn't vanish. They started to sing. A melody I remembered from the tape. But now it wasn't distorted. It was clear, ancient, beautiful in the most terrifying way. I covered my ears. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away from that sound. But I swear to you, it followed me. Even now, I hear it. Even in silence, they sing. The air was colder down here. I don't remember exactly how I found the spiral staircase beneath the altar. One moment, I was staring at the journal in my hands, flipping through Father Pedro's last entry, and the next, the stone floor cracked open like a dry wound. The passage led down, swallowing the faint light from my flashlight with every step I took. My breath echoed off the stone walls. Each inhale sounded louder, more ragged. I felt like I was descending into something ancient, something that had been buried for good reason. The stairway finally gave way to a narrow hallway, damp with rot. The walls were lined with broken sconces, melted candles, and long dead flowers. The smell was overwhelming, mildew, old blood, and a strange, sweet incense that clung to my skin. Then I saw it. The room was circular, with high ceilings that curved like a dome overhead. A cracked music stand stood in the center, surrounded by pews turned to ash and a ring of unlit lanterns. Sheets of paper were scattered across the floor, most of them burned or soaked in what looked like oil. But one book sat on a stone pedestal, untouched by flame or time. It called to me. I walked to it slowly, knees weak, palms sweating. My flashlight flickered as I opened the book. The title etched into the cover was in Latin, but I understood it without knowing how. The Litany of Ascension. The pages inside were wrong. I don't mean the words were evil. I mean they were alive. The ink shimmered. Notes danced across the staves, as if they were being written in real time. I touched one page and heard a faint hum, like a choir warming up behind my ears. It wasn't just music. It was a ritual. The first verse spoke of harmony between the seen and unseen. The second called upon the mouths of the innocent to lift their voices so that the gate might hear. And the final verse, half-faded, almost erased, was blank except for one word burned into the parchment. Conductor. The realization sank like a stone in my gut. This wasn't a hymn meant for celebration. It was a map, a design, and someone had tried to sing it once already. Pedro, Mateo, the entire choir. They hadn't just died in that fire. They had become part of this litany. I turned the page, and the air around me shifted. The candles in the lanterns sparked to life on their own. Shadows stretched along the walls in impossible directions. I heard a note, just one, faint and hollow, come from the choir loft above me, even though I was underground. I backed away from the pedestal, clutching the book to my chest. Then I heard it again. A voice. Whispering. Roman. I froze. My flashlight dimmed again. I turned in a slow circle, searching the corners of the room. No one was there, but the whisper came again, closer this time. Sing with me, brother. My heart dropped. It was Mateo. His voice was cracked, like it had been scraped across glass. But I knew it. Every syllable carried years of memories. The way he used to hum in the kitchen, the way he sang off-key in the car. It was him. But it wasn't just him anymore. Don't you see, Roman? He whispered, his voice circling the room like wind. He showed us the way. We only needed one more verse. I gripped the book tighter, my fingers trembling. Finish it, he said. You're the last note. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I couldn't. My feet felt nailed to the floor. All I could do was stare at the final page, empty, waiting like a mouth open in silence. The litany wasn't done, and it wanted me to finish it. I don't remember climbing the stairs again. I only remember the sound following me. The choir warming up, breathing, waiting, and somewhere in the darkness, the conductor's hand began to rise. I never wanted to go below. From the first time I stepped into St. Aloria, the stone steps behind the altar whispered threats I could almost understand. Cold air bled from the cracks in the floor, like something exhaling from the earth itself. And yet, that night, with the air thick with smoke that didn't come from any fire I could see, I descended. The steps were narrow and slick with a dampness that felt alive. Each step down made my chest tighter, like something heavy was being pressed into my lungs. The darkness swallowed my flashlight beam in seconds, but I kept going, one hand on the wall, the other clutching the old oil lantern I had found in the sacristy. Its flame trembled more than I did. I lost count of how many steps I took. 40? Maybe 100? It felt endless. And then the air shifted. The moment I reached the bottom, the silence changed. It wasn't silence anymore. It was quiet but full, like being inside a throat holding its breath. The chamber opened into a vast pit. My light stretched out into space but touched nothing solid for several meters. Then it found them. Bones. Dozens. No, hundreds. Charred. Some still clothed in scraps of blackened robes, others with their fingers curled like they had died in pain or in prayer. Skulls with mouths gaping toward the ceiling, locked in a final scream. Or a song. I stepped forward carefully. The floor crunched underfoot, brittle as if made of dead leaves, but I knew it wasn't leaves. It was ash, a thick layer that had settled over everything like snow. And then I saw him, curled near what looked like the remains of an old choir pit. Half stone, half collapsed, was a smaller skeleton, bones thinner than the others, arms clutching something close to the chest. My breath caught. I already knew. I dropped to my knees, hands shaking, brushing the ash from the small bundle he held. It was brittle but intact. A sheet of paper, stained, frayed, but protected between his ribs. I tugged it free. The ink was faded but readable. It was music. One final verse. At the bottom, scrawled in the margin in jagged charcoal strokes, was one word. Roman. I didn't remember falling, but suddenly I was sitting in the ash, cold sweat dripping from my neck. My name. In his hand. Had Mateo come here knowing I would follow? Had he tried to finish what Father Pedro started? Or had he been trying to stop it? I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My throat wouldn't work. Around me, the ash began to stir. Not like something walking through it, but like something breathing beneath it. I stood slowly, eyes locked on the edge of the pit, where the stone looked darker. Wet. Almost burning. The air grew warmer, the kind of warmth that feels wrong. Like the heat inside a closed oven. The lantern flickered violently. I clutched the hymn page and backed away. A sound rose from the depths. Not a scream. Not a voice. A note. Just one. Low and long, vibrating through my bones. It sounded like it came from nowhere and everywhere at once. And then, faintly, like wind through a ruined bell tower. Roman. Mateo's voice. My knees buckled again. I wasn't alone. I had never been. And now I understood. This wasn't just a place of death. It was a stage. And I was being called to sing. I sat with my back against the stone wall of the cathedral's crypt, the hymn sheet trembling in my hands. The paper was old, stained with soot and something darker, something that felt alive beneath my fingertips. My flashlight flickered, casting wild shadows over the jagged bones and melted candles around me. The air down here wasn't just cold, it pulsed. Every breath I took felt borrowed, as if the cathedral was deciding whether I deserved to keep it. I read the final verse again, the words crawling across the page in a language I didn't know I understood, yet my mouth itched to speak them. The final note completes the flame, and the flame opens the gate. I shouldn't have come, but it was too late to run. A faint hum echoed above me, soft, layered, inhuman. The choir was waking up. I climbed the spiral stairs back into the main hall, my legs weak, my mind cloudy. The nave looked different now, twisted like a dream remembered wrong. The pews were gone. The ceiling stretched higher than before, and from its peak hung black ropes, swinging slowly like the pendulum of a dying clock. At the center of it all stood Father Pedro. He was waiting near the altar, tall and still. His robes flowed like ink, and his skin looked like wet ash. His eyes, hollow and glowing faintly red, fixed on me. "You found it," he said, his voice low and dry like burning paper. "You brought the final verse." I didn't answer. My mouth was dry, my heart pounding so hard it made my teeth ache. "You were always meant to finish it, Roman," Pedro said. "It has to end. One way or another." I shook my head. "You killed them. You burned them alive." He took a step forward. The floor beneath him creaked with a sound like bones cracking. "No," he whispered. "They sang themselves into the fire. I only gave them the music." I backed away. The cathedral groaned around me, as if agreeing with him. From the choir loft, I heard the first notes, soft, whispery like voices behind a closed door. I turned. The loft was filled with silhouettes. Dozens of them. Children. Eyes hollow, mouths wide open. They were singing, but no sound came out. Pedro raised his arms. "They are waiting for you." The last voice. The conductor. I looked at the page in my hands. The final verse. I could feel it, like a splinter in my brain, pushing deeper with every heartbeat. The lyrics begged to be spoken. I dropped to my knees. "I didn't ask for this," I said. "I came for my brother." Pedro tilted his head. "You came because you were chosen. Not by me. By the music." Suddenly the ground shook. Dust fell from above. The stained glass windows, though shattered and blackened, glowed faintly from within. The air vibrated, heavy with something older than words. Behind me, I heard a soft voice. "Roman." I turned. It was Mateo, or what was left of him. He stood near the choir loft, dressed in the robes I'd seen in the photograph, his skin pale, his eyes pleading. His mouth moved, but no sound came. I stepped toward him, heart torn in two. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I should have saved you." Mateo shook his head slowly. He pointed to the page in my hand. Then he mouthed something. "Sing it, or we never leave." I looked around. The children. The choir. My brother. All trapped. Trapped by a song that had no end. Pedro spread his arms wider. "You are the final note." And I realized he was right. The song didn't want power. It wanted closure. I raised the page. My hands stopped shaking. And then, I began to sing. The moment my voice touched the air, the choir joined me, not in words, but in something deeper. Something beneath language. It rose through the cathedral like fire through a field. The shadows screamed. The stone cried. And Pedro smiled. But something was wrong. As I sang, I felt something rise inside me. Heavy. Burning. Hungry. The song wasn't ending, it was becoming. Becoming me. My body shook. My skin burned. My eyes rolled back as I hit the final note. And just before the world went black, I saw the choir smile. Not kindly, but with teeth. The song had waited too long. And now it would never stop. I never believed sound could bleed. But now I do. The moment I finished humming the first line of the final verse, the cathedral responded. Not gently. Not beautifully. It screamed. A low rumble rolled through the blackened floorboards, deep like a growl from something massive waking underground. The stained glass shards still clinging to the windows rattled violently. Some cracked further, spiderwebs of red and green crawling across their surfaces like veins. And then silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. My throat felt raw. I hadn't meant to keep singing, but the melody seemed to have a grip on me. It was as if the hymn had taken root in my bones. I stepped back from the altar, breath shallow, hands trembling, the air suddenly hot and dry like fire wanted to be born again. Roman, a voice rasped behind me. I turned slowly. Pedro stood near the back pews. Only, it wasn't really Pedro anymore. His cassock hung off his shoulders like wet rags. His skin had lost all color, stretched tight across his skull like old parchment. His eyes, once cloudy, now burned with something unnatural, like twin coals buried deep in ash. "You sang it," he said softly, smiling in that broken way. "You opened the gate." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My lips were numb. And then they started appearing. Figures rose from the shadows between the pews, tall, thin silhouettes, charred and featureless. Their movements were wrong, jerky like broken puppets. They climbed over one another in complete silence, spilling into the aisles, their heads twitching toward the altar. The infernal choir. No mouths. No eyes. Just hollow faces turned toward me, as if waiting for a cue. And then they began to sing. I didn't hear the sound through my ears. I felt it, crawling into my spine like frost. The song was cold and hollow, like a scream held in for centuries. It echoed through the cathedral, each note trembling with sorrow and rage. The floor cracked. The organ behind me, untouched for decades, played a single booming chord all on its own. The pipes shook violently, dust pouring from their mouths like smoke from old lungs. Pedro spread his arms wide, laughing like a madman. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he cried. "They've been waiting so long. They just needed a final voice to bind them." My stomach turned. I felt the pressure building, like the air itself was being pulled down beneath the earth. And then the altar split open. A jagged tear opened beneath my feet, glowing red-hot, lined with teeth made of stone and screaming shadows. Flames licked up through the crack, not normal fire, but dark, violet-tinted, dancing with hunger. The choir leaned in, their voices now layered and deep, the hymn swelling like a wave. Pedro stepped forward, face stretched in reverence. "You brought harmony to the damned, Roman. You've given them a conductor." I stumbled back, but the ground behind me had already given way. My heel slipped. I looked down and saw shapes writhing in the pit, hands made of ash reaching upward, grasping for my legs, my chest, my soul. And still the choir sang. Every regret I ever had played in my mind, Mateo's laugh, his last voicemail, the day I didn't answer. I felt it all like knives in my chest. This wasn't just a song. It was judgment. I screamed, raw, human, terrified. But the hymn didn't stop. It only got louder. I don't know how long I'd been down there. Maybe hours. Maybe days. Time had broken into splinters, and I walked across each one like a thread pulled too tight. The cathedral was no longer stone and ash. It had changed. It pulsed like a lung, breathing me in and out. The pews had rotted into shadows, and the stained glass had melted into walls that bled when I touched them. Fire hummed from deep below the altar, low and steady, like something alive was asleep underneath. I stood in the choir loft, clutching the last page of the hymn. My hand trembled. The parchment felt like skin, warm, thin, almost pulsing. Below me, in the black pit where the choir once stood, the ghosts were waiting. They didn't move, but I could feel them watching, dozens of pale, melted faces turned up toward me. Their mouths were open, silent, expectant, and Pedro was there. He stood at the altar, arms raised as if still leading some holy procession, though his robes were torn and soaked with soot. His eyes glowed faintly red, like embers buried in snow. "It must be sung," he said. It always needed to be sung by someone who bled, someone who mourned. I stared at him, my voice caught in my throat. "You knew," I said. "You knew my brother would come." He nodded. "I called him, just as I called you." My jaw clenched. "Why?" I asked, nearly shouting. "Why us?" Pedro stepped closer, his feet leaving ash prints on the stone floor. "Because the ones who hurt carry the loudest voices," he said. "Pain echoes. Grief holds pitch. Guilt, Oh, guilt harmonizes perfectly with hell. I felt the hymn in my hand vibrate, like it wanted to leave me, like it had waited too long. Pedro whispered, "Sing, Roman. Finish it. Become the conductor." A sound rose from below. The infernal choir. It began as a low hum, deep and rumbling, like the earth grinding its teeth. Then voices layered in, broken, breathless voices. Some crying, some laughing, some just screaming, but all of them in tune. All of them waiting for my note. I opened my mouth. The words spilled out like smoke. Latin I had never studied, rhythms I had never learned, melodies that bent the air like heat. As I sang, the walls cracked. Flames licked up from the cracks in the floor. The ceiling groaned as if it would fall. But still I kept going. The ghosts below lifted their heads. The song wrapped around me like chains. I felt my skin pull tight. I couldn't stop. My voice wasn't my own anymore. It was Mateo's. It was Pedro's. It was every child who had sung and burned and been forgotten. And then I saw the pit open. It tore open in the center of the choir, revealing a spiral of black fire. It didn't roar. It whispered. It called. I knew what I had to do. I stepped down from the loft, the hymn still in my hand, the song still pouring from my throat. Pedro reached for me, but I walked right past him. I stood at the edge of the fire, the last note on my tongue. And I jumped. The flames didn't burn. They welcomed. As I fell, I saw faces. Mateo was smiling. Not in pain, not afraid, just free. The hymn vanished from my grip, dissolved into sparks. Then came silence. Not empty, but full. Heavy. Final. And I thought to myself, I think that means I won. Then the fire closed over me. The choir stopped. The cathedral groaned once more, and fell quiet. Forever. Or so I thought. They say if you listen close enough to silence, you'll hear what was never meant to be spoken. It's been weeks since I threw myself into the fire. Or maybe it's been longer. Time doesn't move the same in the place I'm in now. There's no sunrise here, no ticking clock. Just an endless humming, low, steady, like someone holding a single note on an organ far beneath the earth. I don't know if I'm dead. That would be easier. Clean. Finished. But I feel too much. My thoughts still move. I remember everything, the cathedral's twisted arches, the way the choir rose from the ashes, and Mateo's burned hands holding that cursed sheet of music. I remember the flames kissing my skin as I sang that final verse, not with fear, but with purpose. For a moment, there was peace. A moment when the screaming stopped, and the music broke apart like glass in the wind. But peace doesn't last in places touched by hell. Someone posted a recording online yesterday. I don't know how I know, it's just a feeling, like a thread tugging at what's left of me. The video shows nothing. Just blackness. But if you wear headphones and turn the volume all the way up, you can hear it. A choir. Not beautiful. Not broken. Just wrong. It bends in and out of key, like something trying to remember how to sound human. And underneath it, barely there, is my voice. I don't remember singing it. I didn't write the words. But I know it's me. They call it the San Telos tape. Some think it's fake. Others think it's cursed. No one knows that every play lets them in a little more. That each time someone listens, the ashes stir. The cathedral still stands, what's left of it? Cracked stone, scorched wood, and that damn music stand untouched by fire. Locals say at sunset, you can hear children humming from the choir loft. No one goes near it now. Not even the wind. Sometimes I wonder if Mateo made it out. If his soul found rest when I took his place. Or if he's still here, somewhere in this endless hum, singing beside me. I hope not. I hope he's far from this song. But me? I am the last note. And I think the choir is waiting to begin again.